The following podcast contains spoilers, adult language, and wait, Steve, what are you doing?
Ooh, it's snowing, and it's so pretty.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think you should be,
Shh, I'm just gonna try and cut some in my mouth and on my tongue.
What?
And then snow angels.
Oh, jeez.
This is a message from the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Due to the recent crisis, we ask that you remain in your homes. Do not attempt to communicate or interact with the creatures, even if they are people you know.
Lock your doors. Bar your windows. The dead are coming. It's time for Aim for the Head, an all Walking Dead universe podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Diana and Steve.
Hi, and welcome back to Aim for the Head podcast. I'm Diana.
And I'm dead. No, I'm Steve.
And this is podcast episode number 282. This week we're going to be beginning our coverage of the limited series Chernobyl. Today we're going to be chatting about episode 1. The title of the episode is, I guess in order, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's 1 hour, 23 minutes, 45 seconds, I guess.
Yeah, 1:23:45. That's when the reactor went boom.
That's when it went kablooers. And it is usually our way to be a little punchy about certain things, and we will try our very best to not be, oh, good Lord, disrespectful in any way. We were just talking about this before we started, that this is our first time really sort of covering something that, I mean, this really happened. So while it's easy to like poke fun and make fun of people making stupid decisions with like zombies and like a man in a mask who comes inside your house and stabs you and blah, 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 those are all things that we cover that are not based in reality. This entire show is reality. So we do like to lighten things because of the dark mood of our other shows that we cover. We mean no disrespect by anything we do that's funny. It's just, we all understand this is a dark, dense subject with lots and lots of, there's not a lot of fun in these episodes. No. And that's fine. We're not covering it because of that. But, there may be some moments where we might, toss a joke in there. And we will never mean to do that at the expense of anybody who had to go through all of this. So we just want to throw that out there. Kind of puts us in a unique position. If you really think about it, you're right. Like, we've never covered anything that had to do with an actual event, like a historical event of any kind.
Right. Yeah, everything we've done has been fiction. So
yes, fiction. Not today, folks. So
now we're covering something that's fission. There's a joke.
See, that's the kind of stuff that I think it'll be acceptable. I mean, overall, like, acceptable to say. I don't know that the humor is acceptable because it really wasn't that great. But
wow,
typical.
Okay, well, I'm gonna leave. Thanks.
So before we get started, usually we discuss like sort of our quick thoughts, sort of a, rapid, like, first impressions of this first episode. I have no memory of who went first last time. Maybe it was me.
Ladies first. You go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, what's interesting is when we decided to do this series next, I hadn't watched it yet. It's one of those things that, it got fantastic reviews. Everyone said it's amazing. And just so well done, regardless of the sort of, the dark, obviously dark subject matter. And it was one of those things that sat on the DVR, and I always meant to get to it, but it's hard to be motivated to watch something that is ultimately going to be a very depressing and sad tale. So it was one of those things I sort of held off until I was in the right mood. It never happened, and now I sort of was like, great. I was motivated. We chose this because obviously Craig Mazin, who was one of the creators and writers of The Last of Us, which we just covered, he's done so many other things, but the thing that probably got the most acclaim prior to doing The Last of Us was his involvement in Chernobyl. So it felt like a really great fit for us to cover this. We only had a small window of time of about 6 to 7 weeks, so couldn't really do a full series of like 8 to 10 episodes, and this is only 5, so this worked perfectly. So anyway, point being, I hadn't seen this episode before, but you have watched all of the series when we decided to do this. I was amazed at how much I didn't know about this, and I think that's going to be a theme. I think that'll be a theme, not just for me, but I think for others who have watched this series. I also listened to the official podcast, the HBO one, just for this episode, and just to sort of get their feedback on the episode and sort of another layer there. And it seems like that'll be like sort of the going forward. This is a pretty dark series, and there's plenty there that people don't know, or you thought you knew the story, and I'm not sure how much I thought I knew, but I certainly didn't know all of the detail that we've even gotten so far in this first episode, and I'm sure it's only going to get
just wait that I will just say, and I hate to step on your quick thoughts with a quick thought.
No,
there's a moment, there's a scene in either next episode or the third episode, I want to say, that it is the greatest scene of the whole show as far as I'm concerned. It's not gross, it's not an effect scene, it's people talking, but oh my forking god, is it? I mean, yeah, just wait.
Wait, I can't wait. It's great so far. So it starts off, I mean, not to sound.
Do I get to do quick thoughts or no?
Yeah. No, I was going to say it starts off with a bang and it just sort of goes from there. And okay. I didn't even mean that as a pun, but it just is. The structure of it, it's really well done. And there's so much tension. And you get like angry at the TV and all of that, all of the really great parts of a really good drama, like really well written, well structured, just really well done, and makes me really want to watch the next episode. But I'm going to do it week by week because I want to be able to consume the episode, get my thoughts out on paper, listen to that other podcast, sort of keep my thoughts flowing, but just about each episode as we go. I mean, I know how it sort of ends. I know, we know sort of how it ends, but, I don't want to be spoiled about some of the bigger details. So yeah, love the way it started off. How about you? Tell me how you feel about this first episode, your feelings, your deep, dark feelings.
Well, nobody wants to know those, but I had seen this before, and when I watched this, I think when I started watching, like 5 of the 6 episodes had already been dropped. So, right. So literally I like blew through the 5 episodes in like one sitting because it was so good. And I just, kind of what you were just saying, where it's just like, I have to know what happens next. Oh my God. I knew nothing. And the same thing. I remember when it happened, I mean, I wasn't born yet, but I remember when it happened. And, but I have,
that's
you saw what I did
joke.
there. I mean, I'm just like you, I had very little actual like practical knowledge of
right
what actually happened. I mean, I just heard that, yep, there was an accident there, and I remember it was detected by like scientists in Norway. That was the first bit that the West got of it, because that was because the fallout had drifted northeast or whatever, and they picked it up. Their sensors started to detect it. And I remember that happening, and there was a lot of discussion of, well, what's going to happen? But then it was sort of like, well, they must have fixed it. You know what I mean? It was, and he just, that's why I was much like you, where I was just like, holy crap, I had no idea. And then you add in the fact that it's, extremely well made, it's extremely well acted. It's well written, and everything about it is just is designed to just kind of suck you in. And there are a couple things, detractible things that I'll bring up, which I know one of the pieces of feedback, or at least a message we got already, brought it up, but it has to do with the names and the keeping track of who's who. Which is a little difficult. I'm not gonna lie.
Right.
But yeah. So this is my second time through, and I, just like you just said, I had to fight the urge to just like, well, let's go to episode 2. Come on, because I have memory, because I kind of know what's coming up. Because I have seen the whole thing, so I know, oh yeah, I remember this scene, and this is going to lead to this scene, and I really want to see this scene, but that's not in this episode, and so I'm very much forcing myself. Nope, you just got to go one at a time, and like you just said, digest each episode as its own thing, and that way, we can only talk about that, and I will do my darndest to not tip anyone's hand and spoil anything for anyone. So
good.
But the last comment is, I've seen this is my second time through, and I just got to say, it keeps getting funnier every time I see it. So,
I mean, it's just a laugh riot.
It is. It really is. So yeah, I mean, great show, and I think the best thing is to use the very famous comment, "You ain't seen nothing yet." So if the first episode hooked you in and you were horrified yet you couldn't look away, just wait. Yeah. Now's probably a good time to use the quote. I put it in my notes. I wasn't sure where I wanted to use it, but I'm using the air quotes, the official HBO podcast, which was a delight to listen to. I didn't know it's hosted by Peter Sagal from NPR, and I love Peter Sagal. And he's really smart, and he asked all these really great questions. He's an avid, television watcher, consumer of pop culture, kind of a little bit of a nerd and a geek about certain things. So he's the perfect person to sort of get into the weeds on this. And it was simply just Peter and Craig Mazin talking. It's really a great conversation. They really talk about the things that they could and couldn't show, just in terms of time. But the way the podcast ended, I cannot tell you how hard I laughed when, to sort of close out the podcast, Peter Sagal says, "Craig, thank you so much. This has been fascinating and not a little terrifying." To which Craig Mazin says, "Thank you, Peter. I can assure you it gets worse." Peter Sagal laughs like a hyena and then says, "Tune in next week for even more depressing stories of real life disasters." And that was the end of the podcast. And I was like peeing my pants laughing, because I'm like, if you can take a depressing topic like that and have some, I just thought it was great because they were just like right on top of each other. It's like, this was fascinating but terrifying, which I think is a great way to describe this episode. And I just love how Craig Mazin is, "Thank you. It's going to get worse." It's going to get much, much worse. Yes. And it is. And I think, I can't remember if it was in the podcast or if it's in the little features that HBO does that are, there's like a little 2-minute behind the scenes kind of thing. But and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I did not re-listen to the podcast, but at some point Mazin kind of talks about how they're doing this, and most of the people that you see in this series are real people, but some of them are like amalgamations of a bunch of people that they didn't, like pretend. And I want to say it's not really this episode. It's more of, coming up, they're going to start getting, help from scientists in the Soviet Union from all over the place. And rather than having a cast of thousands that it probably was in real life, they just kind of mushed them into like 1 or 2 or 3 people.
That makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just for time, look, we don't have the budget to have a 100,000 person cast, and it's going to be people that maybe only came in and contributed one thing. Might have been a huge thing, but it might have been one thing. And so they kind of just said, yeah, we're going to say these 20 scientists is this scientist or something like that. And so that's sometimes when you're watching this, you just got to kind of keep that in mind that 90% of what you're seeing is, the actual people are real people, and the other 10% are real people. Just it was not one person. It might be this person's representing a whole bunch. So
right. So very true moments and scenes and emotions. Just it might have been 2 or 3 people having those things happen as opposed to this one moment here.
Right.
Which I think is great. It's very honest. We all know that there's dramatic license taken in any kind of, dramatic retelling of a historical event. There's always some kind of, things condensed for time and things like that. So but I appreciate that how upfront he is about it.
Yeah. All right.
So getting into our discussion, let's first start off with just a quick episode description of what we were told from HBO would be the description of episode 1. If you want to go ahead and do that, and then we'll move into details.
I sure can. Again, this is Chernobyl, episode 1, and the title, as we said, is 1/23/45, and the description is as follows. Plant workers and firefighters put their lives on the line. Sorry. Yeah. To control a catastrophic April 1986 explosion at a Soviet nuclear power plant. And that is your episode description.
It sure is. Let's first.
I think it's really humorous because that description assumes that any of those people are going to survive.
It's very nice. It's very nice. You know what it is? It's very hopeful. It's hopeful.
It is.
They put their lives on the line.
It's the only uplifting thing.
We could make it. We could make it through. Maybe not. Before we get into our individual, moments that really hit us, quotes from the episode, things like that. Let's first discuss nuts and bolts, writer and director of the episode, which I believe you have that listed there.
I do indeed, although I believe it was you that put it in there, but thank you.
You're welcome. I was looking something else up and I was like, oh, okay, I'll plop this in here because,
It was really nice because I looked at it, I'm like, did I do this already? I don't remember. So then I was going around going, did like I sleep, I was asleep and I got up and I signed in as asleep and I don't know, but it was weird. But yes, the writer is, of course, the amazing Craig Mazin, who, we just got done talking a ton about with The Last of Us because he wrote basically that whole show as well. And we all know, we've talked about him a bunch already. So, and he's phenomenal in this. I mean, the writing is unbelievable. And I think it's really amazing that he clearly is adept at writing fiction and for writing nonfiction, Yeah. That The Last of Us, The Last of Us completely made up, yet it was, astounding drama. And now we have this, which is based on a real event and still astounding drama. So the guy clearly has got the chops and is a hell of a writer. So I did not look it up, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say he probably writes all 5 episodes. But we'll get there each week. So yeah. Our director this time around is a French guy named Johan Renck.
Nice.
And he is director, has directed a bunch of things previously, including obviously, he did this, but then he directed several episodes of Breaking Bad. He's directed a whole bunch of made-for-television movies. I believe right now the thing he's finishing up is a movie about Saddam Hussein when he was like hiding after the Iraq War, when he was like living in a pit and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But also more importantly and interesting for our audience is he directed an episode of The Walking Dead.
Oh,
how about that? And we're talking
the connections are
everywhere. Yeah, and we're talking ancient history. He directed the 4th episode ever of The Walking Dead from season 1, which is an episode entitled Vatos, which I believe, if memory serves, is the episode where the Rick and the boys are looking for Merle in Atlanta, and they run across the guys
Gang
that
members
are like protecting the old people in the retirement home. And I think, didn't they take the bag of guns and they need it back?
They
Whatever.
did.
Anyway, so that he directed that episode, which I thought was kind of cool. That not only did he direct The Walking Dead, but he directed like one of the original season 1 episodes. Wow, how cool is that? So yeah, and I thought he did a fantastic job on this particular one. I mean, he really set an incredible tone. And the way that this episode is carried out, I mean, you can't help but get sucked in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's dive right in. And what better way to start off a very depressing drama than let's have a character who we haven't even met yet. Let's have him kill himself. I think if you use that as a harbinger of things to come, I think that's the right thing to do, people. Because if you start off your drama with someone hanging themselves, then that's definitely, this is going to get dark real quick. And yes, it did, and it do. And just, I'm not going to give anything away, but I really do love Jared Harris. He's fantastic. I've loved him in so many things that he's done. What the hell was that show with the ship? The one that was on AMC. Do you remember?
Yeah, The Terror.
Yeah,
it was
The Terror. Thank you. He was fantastic on The Terror.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't hang himself there, but he does in another popular drama that I don't want to talk about because I don't want to give away spoilers, but that was my first reaction. I was like, yes, I'd like more dramas where Jared Harris's character hangs himself at some point in the drama. So yeah, that was my first reaction to Chernobyl.
At least he fed the cat first.
He did. As soon as he put out more than what was needed for the meal, I was like, he's not coming back. Oh, he's not coming back.
Yeah. But I think some of it too is that he didn't want the cat to like eat his face, so he made sure to feed it really good before he did it.
That's true. But yeah, I want to also, I mean, all joking aside, with that opening scene, I actually really like how that was structured because, if you go and you look it up right away, like if you're one of those people that, I'm not one of those people. If you go to like Wikipedia and you look up who the players are, and and the gentleman that Jared Harris played, Valery Legasov. We're going to butcher all these names, by the way. If we have any people with Russian heritage, please don't hate us. We're doing the best we can. We're going to go with Legasov until I hear his name said by himself. Anyway.
Well, Skarsgård says his name when he calls, so you can get what the show thinks his name is pronounced right there in episode 1. So
that's true. So you can look it up, and he's a real person, and he really did commit suicide. By the way, exactly 2 years to the minute. They can't confirm if it's to the minute. I'm sorry, but 2 years to the day from the explosion. Amazing.
They say 2 years, 1 minute on the show.
Amazing. He
because he hangs himself, and then literally it flashes back and it says 2 years and 1 minute earlier.
Yeah. So he there's two huge things that happen in this episode, and they sort of get them out of the way in the first 5 minutes. This character who does kill himself 2 years after the explosion, they take care of that first, and sort of, then the story is told, then they go back to the actual explosion. So between this committing suicide and the explosion, taking place right away, now everything else that we talk about is all because of this explosion. And we sort of know, we know where it's going to end because, they showed us. But I really enjoy that. It's sort of, it gets that, some of those historical things out of the way right off the bat. Now we can get into the nuts and bolts of talking about these people, how they reacted, what they did, whether they were involved with, lies, cover-ups, whatever, so it's, I think it was great because there's just so much to talk about with this event that but this small thing with him committing suicide, it's a historical thing that happens, but if you get it out of the way, then you don't have people who look it up and go, oh, he kills himself. Well, when's that going to happen on the show? It doesn't matter. It's already done. You don't have to worry about it. You know what happens. Now you get to meet him and see why he ends up there, which I think is, I like that kind of storytelling. So what did you think of this sort of opener where we go right from him to the blast in the sky?
It's a really, I think, captivating opening for the whole show because we're expecting a show about a nuclear disaster, and instead we're in some guy's apartment. We don't know who he is. But he looks out the window. You can tell that, there's a guy probably in the KGB sitting out in his car watching him. Right. And, so you're like, you're just like, I don't know what's going, I don't know who is this? What's happening? And then he, goes out, he hides the tapes, when he takes out the trash, and then he comes back. And like you said, then he puts out a lot of food for the kitty, and then he hangs himself, right? Yeah. And so you're like, what the hell? You don't even know. And then immediately it cuts to the pregnant woman getting up in the middle of the night because she's sick, and she kind of goes and throws up a little or whatever, and then she goes into the kitchen because she's preggers and probably super craving something, and right then, in the distance, maybe a mile or two away, you see the explosion. And I thought it was great because you see the explosion visually, and then there's like a 3 or 4 second delay, and then you hear the boom from it. And that's what wakes everybody up. And so I thought it was really cool. And you're like, I don't understand what's going on. Who was that guy? Why, I mean, it's Jared Harris, but you don't know who he is in the story,
Right.
And
how does he relate? Yes.
And I thought it was really, really, really just a really cool way to jump right into it and kind of start off with, what? and then, but then once it goes to the reactor exploding, then, I mean, it's just on like Donkey Kong. I mean, you're just going then, and you kind of forget that whole scene with Jared Harris. Or that Jared Harris is even in it because he doesn't show up again until the very end of the episode, an hour and 20 minutes later, So, and interestingly enough, Mason says in the little documentary about the episode, because they ask him about, you open the show with the Jared Harris character killing himself, and he literally says one of the things that they decided was they didn't want to go through this whole show, the whole story, and then the last episode, kind of have him kill himself and kind of have this weird twist shock ending, because that's not what the show's about. Right. The show isn't about that, I mean, he wanted it to be about the suffering and everything that people went through, even the good guys that went through mentally, emotionally, and all that stuff. But he said, I didn't want it to be just about that guy killing himself at the end because he couldn't live with what had happened. So instead, he's like, we're going to show that right at the beginning, so everybody knows, okay, this character is dead. Right. And now we get to see what drove him to do what we saw him do. So that was also a calculated decision, just to take out that sort of twist ending thing that would have happened otherwise in, episode 5.
Yeah.
Or 6 or whatever the last episode is, right?
Yeah. I agree. And as a sort of it's a plot moment, but the structuring of it being right at the beginning, I think it's just brilliant. Just gets it, like I said, gets it out of the way. And like he says himself, the story isn't about him killing himself. It's about all these other people and how they deal with this crisis, from here on out. Right. And I love that too. I didn't make a note of it in my notes, but I'm glad you brought it up. The fact that, when the pregnant woman is Ludmilla, and when she is up and sort of padding around and going to get like a snack and goes past the window, and I just think it's amazing the way they did that. Seeing it, and you're like, oh shit, and then boom, because it's because of the sound traveling slower. So it's just I'm glad you brought it up. I had forgotten about that part, but it was just visually stunning, just because it actually looks kind of cool, like the kind of the colors that it creates because of all the chemicals that are involved too. So yeah, very, very, very cool.
Well, and that what I love is it's almost like a searchlight going straight up.
Yes.
And that's where you get kind of that rainbow, color effect. And that literally, that is like energy that is emitting from the, now the nuclear core of this reactor, which has, of course, exploded. So, I mean, it's horrible. Well, I mean, literally, it's like, it's a thing that, if you ever see such a thing, you're only going to see it once.
Yeah,
because,
exactly.
unless you're like driving away in a car at like 100 miles an hour from where she was when you see it, you're probably going to die. I mean, it's just, I one of the things that's going to happen for you and for anybody that is watching this for the first time is you will develop even more bad taste in your mouth for what the knuckleheads did on Fear the Walking Dead, and how just either they just didn't care or just how ill-informed they were about how lethal radiation is in the really real world. Because, I mean, and again, it's we have to see what's going to happen here in the coming episodes about just how far-ranging this is and just how deadly it is. And this is not weapons-grade nuclear material. This is reactor-grade, there's a difference. This is not as powerful as the stuff that blew up in Fear, and yet you have people, that are like, we're fine. What are you talking about? We hit under a truck.
The tote's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, geez,
yeah.
Please.
So yeah.
Yes, I look forward to hating the knuckleheads some more. If that's the only good thing that would come out of this, nuclear power disaster knowledge that we now will gain. And there's lots of other folks that we know that are Fear the Walking Dead watchers who did watch this at the same time and were like, this is wrong. So I didn't know, but even I knew that. I'm like, we're playing a little fast and loose here. So I'm looking forward to having all of my suspicions confirmed, which I agree. So what's interesting is that, the gal who wakes up in the middle of the night, Ludmilla, her partner, husband, I'm not sure if it's her husband. They have the same last name.
It's her husband. Yeah.
Yeah. He is a fireman for their area. And so we sort of see from their perspective, she wakes up and sees the blast, but then he gets the call and has to go. So we're then seeing the sort of attacking the problem from the outside. So we have the two different things going on. We've got the people in the control room, which is sort of a separate thing going on there, and fighting what's going on the inside. And then you have the firemen who show up, and just the stress and the the anger that I feel knowing that these poor guys, they were sold a bill of goods. They were told a lie to get them there to help out, and it's like they're told the roof is on fire, and it's not that at all, and they are literally driving to their deaths, and they just don't even know it. And I just that moment where the one fireman he picks up that piece of, I thought it was concrete, but they said that it's graphite, which is supposed to be the inside of the core, and he picks it up and then and he puts it down, and then not too long after, his hand just starts to bleed. From the it's
burned.
Yeah, it's all burned, and the skin is just all burned and bleeding, and it's just like I just put it down as that his hand just starts to disintegrate.
Yeah.
Like
you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah, it's like he touched lava and went from there. So I just thought that feeling of dread to know that something as simple as just touching an object, that's it. That's all he did. He just touched it and put it down, and then it made his hand, do what it did. You put down the sense of dread, and that's just such a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think, the firemen, you really get a sense of it. And just, fun fact, the firemen, all of the firemen, basically when they got out of their trucks, when they pulled up to the, reactor building number 4, they were dead in terms of their exposure. You know what I mean? It's they had no chance. You know what I mean? And that guy, the character's name was Misha, is what Ludmila's husband talks to him. And he picks it up. He's like, and he's just like, what the hell is this? Because if you remember, it's like concave on one side. It's like a broken piece. And you could tell that, like, if it was full, it would make a circle. And that's part of the housing that one of the control rods would have gone through. Because a control rod in this case is a really long metal cylindrical piece. And they tend to be made out of a really dense material. Originally probably lead, but by this point, like they say in the episode, it's graphite. And it's used to control the fission that's going on. That the particles are zipping around and they're splitting the atoms, which is what's releasing all the energy, which is what turns the water to steam, and then the steam turns the turbines. That's how reactors work. And when you want to turn down the power, you push in those control rods into the core, and that really dense graphite kind of interferes with those particles, and you get less nuclear fission going on, so less energy. And conversely, when they want to crank up the reactor, they pull those rods out, and then those things aren't there interfering, and then you get more. And so that's what when he says, when he just picks it up, he's like, well, what is this? Because he'd never seen anything like that before. And I mean, like that dude, probably, and I don't think they showed him kind of collapse, and they started wrapping up his hand with a bandage, but like that guy probably was dead within an hour.
Yeah.
Because of that. I mean, the radiation that was, that piece of material was so, heavily radiated and emitting so much radiation.
Oh yeah.
That the fact that he touched it, he's gone. But then how about the scene after that when Ludmila's husband, and I cannot remember what his name is.
I think Vasily is his name.
Was that his name? Okay.
Vasily, that's his name. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so he starts, fighting, manning one of the hoses, firing, and then he hears Misha scream, and they see the guy peel his glove off, and his hand is just like, it's almost like you said, it's almost like it's melting, right?
Yeah.
And they start wrapping it with the gauze. And so he sees that, and then he looks down by his feet, and there are more pieces of graphite all around him. And he just has this look, and he's just like, oh man, we are so screwed, you know, and so,
he knows
you're
it,
just like, you know, but yeah, again, good Russian boy, you know, he's gonna do what he's told, so he stays. But yeah, it's just like I kind of, that was my comment, was just with the music choice, which is almost kind of like a funeral dirge, and the way that the actors are all playing it, it's like, to me, it was almost like a palpable sense of dread. Yeah. You know, that like all of these guys are like, this is not good. You know, they might not necessarily think that they're all going to die, but they're just like, this is not good. You know, this is not what they told this was, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting when you said that thing about the look on his face, and I think that's really something that we can agree on, is that from the moment you see like the really pretty colors from the explosion in the sky, from there on out, there are so many moments where different characters in different moments have that moment pass over their face where they have the realization where they know they're gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
where they're just like
that, I mean, talk about a feeling of dread. I mean, you're literally watching people, you know, wrestle with like, oh, okay, I'm gonna keep doing this, but I'm dead. Like, I'll be dead in an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. This is it. This is this is the end of it.
Yeah, this is my last thing, is I'm gonna die at work. You know.
Right.
Yeah, and we didn't really touch on it, but you know, the pregnant gal sees the explosion, then we hear the explosion, and then he gets up, and they're like, "What's going on?" And it's like, it's a nuclear power plant, and then it cuts to the control room first, and we first meet Dalatov and, you know, all of his minions there, and they were like it's kind of explained, they're conducting a test.
Yeah, they were doing like a safety test that night. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're trying to figure out what happened, and somebody comes running in right away and goes, it blew up. And they're like, what? He's like, the core. And that guy's immediately like, Dolatov's like, he's in shock, you know, because he's like, the core can't explode.
Yeah, and it's not possible.
And part of what we're going to learn, again, and this is not really a spoiler, but it is, I guess, a little bit, in that the prevailing idea on that kind of reactor was that the core just couldn't explode. There wasn't enough fissionable material to cause an uncontrolled chain reaction that would make it blow up. And so when that guy says that, Dalatov is like, nope, that's completely impossible, because that's what he had been taught his whole life. You know, his whole life is education and everything. And everybody in that room had been taught that. They were all, you know, they all had that education. And that's why they immediately jumped to this tank, this water tank that they must have filled up with too much hydrogen, and much like the Hindenburg, it exploded, and then immediately they start rationalizing, yep, that was big enough, it could blow the roof off of the building and cause all this damage. The core's fine, it's this. And so then when the techs are like, well, what do we do about the fire? He's just like, call the firemen, you idiot. You know, I mean, he's just, you know, that's how the fire department gets roped into it. And they're just told, the roof is on fire, the reactor's fine, you know, it's just that, it's just a regular fire. And so, you know, and right away, Ludmilla is very much like, you know, don't go in, you know, don't go to work today. And he's like, we have to. They called everybody in, and, you know, she's dead right. You know, her gut is absolutely correct that, this is not just a normal fire. You know, I mean, it's the colors and everything. All that stuff is stuff we've never seen before. And, you know, don't go. And he's just like, nope, I got to go. And but anyway, so you get both of these stories going on. And, you know, you just mentioned the look on his face, the fireman. But how about the looks on some of those minions as they're running around in the bowels of the reactor? You know, they're like, they know they're dead. You know, they know they're dead. You know, and yet they're still trying to do their jobs. Yeah,
there's this great moment where there's this one guy, and it's so sad because the guy in charge there, the Dyatlov, who's the one who's like, oh yeah, he's like don't, he's like, you stupid, don't be stupid, like that it's not that can't happen, like the thing about the core. So he just censors, he immediately goes right to fire on the roof and we need to put out the fire, and then he sends people, go check on this, go here, do the water there, do this, whatever. And everybody who leaves the room is like, they all know, like, I'm dead. There's nothing I can do about it. I got to go. And there's one guy, his character's name is Yevchenko, and he goes off to assist in this one area. He does a bunch of different things, but there's this really great moment where he finishes helping, and as he's walking away, his body, you can see they're all wearing white. Their uniform is white,
they all look like chefs.
They do. They do. And as he's walking away, like the camera is on his back, and you can see like these open sores that must be, the same thing that happened to the dude out front with his hand, Misha, is happening to him, just over a much larger area. It's happening all over his body, and you can see like the blood starting to come in, like it's blossoming almost like petals, on the back of his outfit. And then we see him again later when someone comes by him and he asks for a cigarette. So there's this really great moment where he just takes a cigarette and has a last cigarette because he knows he's gone. He knows he's dead. And it's just horrifying that these people had to, deal with that. And in such it's like a slow but quick death. Do you know what I mean? Like it happens to them quicker than you would think it does. You would think someone would be sick in the hospital and blah, blah, blah. But it happens within a few hours. But there's still such a slowness to it where you're in pain and suffering, and you're wrestling with your own, mortality in all of that time. And, if someone can hand you a cigarette, sure, you're inside a nuclear power plant, but let's smoke that cigarette. I mean, how much worse can it make it? Have that cigarette.
It's a nuclear power plant that's already blown up. So
right, it's already on fire.
Like, I don't think one smoke's
my cigarette's going to add anything to this, Yeah. So I just thought that the visual that they chose to do of him, he was walking away, and it's just like, it's the blood was almost like when you touch like a felt tip pen to like a Kleenex, and it just spreads immediately. It was a artistically gorgeous way to show something that's so horrifyingly awful. And there's more of that. That happens in so many other moments in this episode.
Oh, yeah. Well, remember, that guy, he comes upon another worker earlier, and the guy's on the ground, and he rolls him over, and, like, his whole face is, like, melting.
Yeah.
And, clearly that guy went into the reactor room or someplace that was just, glowing with radiation, and, it just was, done. And then it was so great because then those two trainee guys show up and they find him, and he's like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we have to go to the reactor room. And he has this look like, okay. But he goes with them, right? And he helps open the door, and and of course the building is like crumbling and the concrete's all cracked, and so he has to like struggle to open the door, and he kind of wedges himself in it to keep it open so they can go in and look around. And they come out, and you can tell they're scared shirtless, and they know because they've seen that the core is just like a big ditch at this point. It's gone, And what's the line from the thing when he's like, hey, the generator is gone, McCready, can we get it working? It's gone, and so they see that, and they come tear-assing out of there, and they just leave that dude.
Yep.
Because they're running for they know they're probably dead, but they're still just like run. And it's at that moment that he tries to follow him that suddenly all of his skin blisters or whatever, and you see the blood, like you said, coming on his nice white, chef's outfit. And I mean, it's just unbelievable. The guy who did the special effects for this, he was asked about it, and he said that it was the most horrific research he ever had to do in his life. to
I can only
learn,
imagine.
what would happen. And he literally says at how awful radiation is because it literally melts you from the inside out.
Oh, awful.
So yeah, it's terrible. But again, so great. I mean, it's just, you're seeing all these people, and it's horrible because again, you in the back of your head, you're thinking these are real people. This probably really happened.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's just you can't not watch. It's like a car wreck. I mean, you're just glued, like, oh my God,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, in the same sort of way, there's this great moment where there's like the apartment areas where Ludmila was and where Vasily lived. People eventually, what would you do if there was like a big warehouse fire not far from you and you could watch it at night? Wouldn't you go outside and watch? Most people would. It's a very human thing to do. And so they
particularly when the fire trucks are zipping by with their sirens on, so you can't go back to sleep.
Yeah. So they so all these folks that live in this apartment area, they are all pretty much outside and watching the whole thing. And there's a moment where someone is like, because of the colors that it's creating from the chemicals, they say it's beautiful. And then you see this moment where they like sort of look up because the ash starts to fall, and I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Because it is visually, it's pretty, it's peaceful, it's kind of calm, and and it shows the kids like playing in the ash and like all this, and as you're watching it, like the pit in my stomach, and I'm like, these people are all dead. They're so dead, and they just don't know.
Dead people watching.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were all like we said, they were fed that line, when he left, and she's like, I've got a bad feeling, and he's like, it's just a roof fire, and they're talking about the same thing amongst themselves. It's just a roof fire. So they don't know that they're in any kind of danger. They're so ignorant to the whole thing, and they're most likely, based on what they say later when like all those board members meet inside the plant, they're I suspect that these folks are never going to really be told the full truth, which is just it's just so sad and horrifying. But to like we said, like it's these beautifully filmed, these sort of beautiful images of the ash falling and stuff like that, and sort of slow-mo of the kids like playing in the ash, and you're like, it's so beautifully horrifying.
Like when the dude picks up the little baby, and you see this little smiling, beautiful little baby, and then as he's picking it up, you can start to see the ash. Yeah. And then like the scene of the woman and the ash is like collecting in her hair, and you're just like, run, just run now, and I thought there was again, cranking up the dread to 1,000 when Ludmila is like outside, and all the folks that she like in her building are like, hey, we're gonna go over to the bridge and get a better look at it, and and the one woman is like, she's like, I'm sure your husband's gonna be fine, and then she looks at her and she goes, none of our boys have ever gotten hurt. And you're just like, they're all dead. It's just like, oh, don't go to the bridge.
Great. So they're gone from like, they've never been hurt on the job, like I'd never broken a bone or had a burn or whatever, to they're gonna die just by showing up. They don't even have like what Vasily's doing. He hasn't touched anything. He's just there, and he's gonna die.
It's you're just like, oh God, it is, and it's haunting when all of them are it's like you said, it's like a spectacle. It's like, oh my God, let's just go watch the fire. And before he left, he even tells her, he said, look, it's the roof's on fire. It's got a lot of tar on it. It's gonna burn all night and smell awful. That's the worst that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so they're just they again, good Soviet subjects. They're believing the information that the state's given them.
Mm-hmm.
And the official thing from the plant is, there was the tank exploded. There's radiation is minimal, and it's the core is fine. It's just a fire. We just need you to come put it out. And so, of course, let's go out and watch.
Yeah, like the good people that we are.
Yep.
There's this great. I think sort of like most of the rest of what we got are some great quotes from the scenes. There's these really great moments captured, with the dialogue. Again, Craig Mazin, so amazing. Mm-hmm. He's got this great moment. My sort of last point I have is really sort of puts a cap on the whole episode is, there's obviously these guys that are like managers from the plant. They help run the plant. They're more like the suits, if you will. And then it looks like either more suits or like board members. There's a meeting that happens there, and they're all around a boardroom table talking about this, that, and the other. What do we do? What do we do? And then there's the one guy, his name is Zarkov. He's the old man at the end of the table. Mm-hmm. And he puts into play the the communist don't tell him nothing playbook, which is basically like he tells them, cut the phone lines, tell them nothing.
Cordon off, surround the town, don't let anybody out.
Don't let anyone in or out. That's how you contain it. Mm-hmm. Blah blah blah. And then he says, he's like, we will all be rewarded for what we do here tonight. It's our moment to shine. And the guys in the room are all like applause and like banging the table, like this is. Oh yeah. And as he's speaking, I'm like, oh my God, they're all going to get sick or die, all of them, because they've been exposed, and they're all going to get either sent to jail or hung I don't know. This is just like unbelievable between mismanagement and stuff like that. It's just the covering up and all of that. I think his moment there with this just absolute tone deaf, like, we're going to be rewarded for sending all these people to their deaths. It's just incredible. What a crazy scene.
Well, yeah. And that's something that it just permeates through this episode is
absolutely
is this kind of fear that all of these people who are, and this is more of the plant workers and those guys, by the way, they're all like Communist Party members that are called in because it's they're like the bosses of that part of the Soviet Union, so they're there because something happened. But you constantly get this, like when the thing first explodes and we get that first scene in the control room, those two guys that were running the test for Dalatov, they're like muttering to themselves, we didn't do anything wrong. We followed we didn't do anything, because they know, okay, you know what? We're either going to be shot or like sent to like Siberia for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what happens. People don't make mistakes in the Soviet Union, right? And that kind of fear permeates all the way up the chain of command, because all of those guys are afraid that they're going to get blamed for this.
Right. Because
someone is, and even Dalatov, remember, like when he looks at those two dudes and he's like, I got to go call, my boss and wake him up, and he's going to wake up his boss and then wake up everybody else up the chain of command. And he's like, I don't know if I can make things better for you guys, but I can sure make it worse. And he's implying that it's your forking fault, right? Even though he's the guy in charge of running the tests, right?
Right.
And so then when he meets with the one scientist guy's name was Foman, and the other guy's name was Brukhanov. I can't remember. He was the dude with the cool hair.
He's the one that had the great hair, and then the other guy had the glasses, and they show up first And they sort of lead that meeting of the local communist guys and the managers of the plant. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like the guys that are in charge of the facility.
Yes.
Like the guy with the cool hair, he's the top guy in charge of the facility. And then Foreman is like the second in command.
Second in command is what it seemed like. Yeah.
Yeah. So when Dolotov goes to see them, remember Dolotov points out that I was running the test that Foreman gave me all the instructions for, right? Mm-hmm. So he's already painting, I just did what I was told. And then Foreman fires back at him by saying, well, since Dolotov was overseeing the whole test, I'm sure he can tell us exactly what happened. Again, very subtly saying, this is your fault, and so again, you have this everyone's like, it's not my fault, I didn't do anything wrong. And those other two guys, even when they're like down in the bowels and they're trying to open the water pipes, they're opening all the valves, right?
Yeah.
And they're like up to their knees in water and it's dripping on them, and they both know that they're dead, that they're being exposed to kilotons of radiation. They're still like, we didn't do anything wrong. They're still sticking to that, going, look, we did everything we were supposed to do. We don't know what happened, but it wasn't our fault. I mean, that they're still all the way to the end there, and you can tell at the end there that their faces are starting to get pink, and the one guy, his hands are swelling up, and it's like bad for those guys, right? And that's how they're going out. But I loved the scene in the bunker where they all those guys pile in there, and they immediately say the two guys, Foreman and Brunikoff, they start doing the whole story of, well, the tank exploded, that blew off the roof. There's minimal radiation, like the core's fine. We're running water to the core to keep it stable, and everything's great. And then that one dude's like, we should evacuate the town.
Yeah.
And they kind of stop, and he's like, people are vomiting outside. People have radiation burns. He said, it's not contained. We got to get everybody out of here. And that's when that old guy, Zarkov, is like, you're a good Soviet because you care about the people. And then he lays that speech on him of like, we're not going to move nobody nowhere.
Yeah.
And
you keep them, the best way to keep it contained is to keep them all here and don't let them out.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't let them out. Don't let them talk. We control the message and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I just laughed at was that, like, that guy, he was probably like 70, like late 60s, 70 years old, maybe even older. I don't know. But clearly, like, he's a guy that, like, he was educated in like the 30s.
Yeah.
Right. And he knows absolutely nothing about nuclear power or radiation.
Yes.
And yet, and I would imagine most of the guys at that table, other than the two scientists who run the plant, know nothing about radiation and nuclear reactors. And yet they're making all the decisions about what they're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think on the HBO podcast, Craig Mazin was saying that those two guys, the Foreman and the Brukhanov guys, that one of them is like an engineer, and the other one is like did have a science degree, or was a scientist but not nuclear. So they had like some sort of relevant experience in the field, but the way it is in Mother Russia is you work where they tell you to work, pretty much. And
exactly,
they have a certain expertise in certain areas. You'll go here, so I think it's said that the only person who has a lot of nuclear experience is just the guy that's in the control room, the Dyatlov. He has a degree. Yeah. They actually, at one point, from just so you know, from the podcast, they do pronounce it as Dyatlov.
Oh, do they? Okay, Dyatlov. Okay.
Yeah, I just listened to it. That's the only reason why it's right in my head. Anyway,
yeah. Okay.
You were gonna say?
I was just gonna say that Foreman at one point says he is a nuclear engineer. So so that makes sense. And then the guy with the great hair, he probably had more education because he was the top dog. But the rest of those guys,
nothing.
I'm guessing a lot of them got their position because they were loyal party members. And the Soviet system worked a lot like that, where people were given positions not because they were necessarily going to be the best at the trained to do them, but because they were loyal. The Soviets did not want to they didn't want to put someone in there that really again, no spoiler here, but Jared Harris, he's really smart, his character, in terms of what he knows about reactors and everything, but he's not really going to go along with the party line necessarily. So
I get that sense.
Not a guy. Yeah. Just for that end conversation, when Skarsgård calls him, he says, hey, Gorbachev formed this committee to deal with this, and you're on it. And then Jared Harris starts asking questions like, well, how much radiation? And then he's like, well, we should evacuate the town. You should start. And Skarsgård cuts him off, and he goes, your job on this committee is to answer questions if you are asked just about the reactor, nothing else. Mm-hmm. Don't open your mouth on anything else. So that's, so he's being told, nobody wants to hear it. You know what I mean? You're there as the technical guy if someone asks, how do they turn it off? You can tell them, So But that scene in the bunker was, first of all, they're in a fallout bunker.
Yeah.
It's just like, guys, is the irony not lost on you? But when that old dude is tapping his cane and making this great speech, right, about how they're going to be good Soviets and remembered forever, and they're going to earn their rewards and all that stuff. What does he say? It's our moment to shine, right? Isn't that his line? And then they applaud, and at the same time you're like, run, you people, run. It's crazy.
Because they all sort of leave that area, and all that's left is Fomin and Brukhanov, and they're talking to Dyatlov about stuff that's happening within the actual plant, and then he gets sick. He just vomits, and he gets sick, and they have to take him out because he's exposed to radiation. So it's like,
right. But they blame it on the water. They say it's the runoff water that, the tank exploded, and the runoff water has a lower level of radiation. And they're like, he's just been exposed to it all, and he'll be fine. But before he gets sick, there's another character in this that I thought was just, again, great character, great performance, and his character's name is Sitnikov, and he's part of the day shift, because if you remember before, how did you say it, Dyatlov? Dyatlov. Before he goes and starts talking to those guys, he tells his minions, call in the day shift. We need people here to make the plant work, right?
Yes,
well, again,
let's kill some more
possible
people
thing
while
you
we're
can
at
do.
It. Yeah.
But so anyway, they're all out front, like milling around, waiting to see what they're going to do. And one of the minions from the night shift finds them, and they're like, "Hey, we need to get the good dosimeter, but it's locked in a safe. We don't have the key." And so he's like, "All right, fine." So he goes and he gets the dosimeter. And so then when we get to this scene where the guy does the speech about, it's our moment to shine, they all leave, and he's waiting in the lobby of the nuclear bunker. And he comes in and he talks to Fomin, whatever his name is, Dalatov, and the hair guy. And he's like, and this is where I wrote down, I didn't write it down the whole thing, but I wrote down a lot of it. And he's like, because the initially the dosimeter that they have, it only goes up to like 3.6 roentgens, which is a measurement of radiation. 3.6, which is very, very small. And even then, if you remember when they say it's like it's maxing out at 3.6 because that's as high as it goes, and they're all like, well, that's not great, but it's not terrible. And, they can live with it type thing. So, but then they're like, go get the good one that's locked away because it can measure a lot higher than 3.6. Okay. So he does it. So he comes in and he reports, and he's like, we went and we got the good dosimeter out of the safe to use it. And they're like, okay, well, what was the reading? And his line was, there was none. The meter burned out the second it was turned on. And then their reaction to that is not, oh my God, let's get out of here, run for our lives. It's typical Soviet system. We got a crappy piece of equipment. And, they're like, how do they expect us to do anything when nothing works, right? So they immediately shoot it down.
Of course.
And then he's like, right, and then he goes on to say, well, because I found another dosimeter from the military fire department, because they called in not just the civilian firefighters, they called in the military guys too. All the firemen in the area were called in. Mm-hmm. And he goes, it only goes up to 200 rotogen, but it's better than the small one, the 3.6 one that they were using already. And they're like, okay, what did that one say? And he goes, it maxed out 200 rotogen.
Yeah.
And he's like, and the guy that did the test for me is the best guy I have to use the dosimeter. And he's like, and again, their response is, well, it's the Army. They probably don't know how to use it or take care of it. It's a faulty piece of equipment. And he's like, no, I tested it and it worked. The test came up that it worked, and it still maxed out at 200. And then he goes on to say, I walked around the exterior of building number 4, which is where the explosion happened. And he goes, I think there's graphite on the ground in the rubble. And this goes back to your earlier point of the fireman that picked up that piece, right?
Yeah. And
again, their response to that is they yell at him and say, you didn't see graphite, you couldn't see graphite, it's impossible, and they're berating him. And then finally Foreman looks at him and goes, are you suggesting that the core exploded? And Sitnikov is like, yes, I am. And then Foreman goes, Sitnikov, you're a nuclear engineer, so am I. Please tell me how an RBMK reactor core explodes. Not a meltdown, an explosion. And I love this line that Sitnikov gives him, because he goes, I don't see how it could explode, but it did.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and it's at that point then that Dialatov says, I will go up to the roof of the next building over, and it will allow me to look down on building 4, and I will be able to see if the core is there or not. And it's at that, and he stands up to do it, and that's when he throws up and passes out.
Yeah.
And so again, this great thing, the two guys in charge, they look at Sitnikov and they're like, okay, you go do it. And he's like, I'm not going. He's like, no ways. I'm not going to do that. And they have to go get that soldier to force him at gunpoint to go do it.
Ugh.
Right?
Awful.
And that, how about that scene when he walks out onto the balcony of that other building, that look on his face as he starts walking up to the edge, and he they don't really show it, but you can tell he looks down and he's literally looking at the exposed reactor core, or what's left of it, that's blown all over the place. And I'm sure that guy is like, I am toast, because he'd seen all, he knew what the dosimeter was saying. He saw the graphite in the rubble. He had made the correct conclusion that this is really bad, and yet those guys aren't. And then the very last scene with them, it's there's no dialogue, but he's sitting in the bunker, and clearly he's reported what he's seen, and you can tell his face is all red and mottled, right, because he's all the exposure. And the two guys are yelling at him, clearly, we don't fucking believe you, and again, you're just like, oh my God, what, you guys are supposed to be scientists,
Yeah. And it's so frustrating because we've, from the first moment, we see what none of the guys inside are seeing, because we're at the perspective of the firemen and the other minions who are sent around the plant to look at this, that, and the other. We see there's definitely an explosion. There's rubble outside. That when at one point when they were running around, the dude that ends up the Yuvchenko, who ends up with the bleeding in his back or whatever, they were trying to get somewhere, and it was literally their hallway was crushed in. There was this whole area to their right as they were running that was all concaved in, and it was just we know, and they are just they are just denial in their head, and it's just so maddening to watch.
Yeah, but like I said, the reason why they are in so much denial is that and I think this, if it's not brought up actually in the episodes, Mason talks about it in one of the podcasts, that literally the experts on nuclear reactor technology at that point, in 1986, the prevailing theory that was accepted by everyone was that kind of a reactor core cannot explode. That there's not enough fissionable material. It's not a high enough grade of nuclear material to create enough critical mass that would result in an explosion. And so when these guys are saying the core exploded, the people that are in charge are just like, no, that's not right, because it can't explode. So of course, we now know that it has, so that's also going to be something we're going to learn as the show continues, is something that can explode, but it did. How? Yeah. And it's going to be, I'm so excited.
I think too, like I made a note at the end. I made a note at the end of my notes. Hilarious. Just that I think the whole overall theme that they're presenting is, lies, and how lies can be so damaging. Just, and our parents always told us when we were kids, lies lead to other lies, and they just get bigger and bigger. And when you're a kid, you're like, yeah, whatever. I just want to get out of, whatever trouble I'm in. But now, with maturity and being an adult and whatever, you look at this and it's like, it all started with one, Dyatlov believed it in his core that, no pun intended, that this could not happen, so it must be this thing. And he's the expert.
It has to be the tank.
Right. Yeah. But I think it's very interesting considering, I don't want to get political, but there's a lot in the world these days where someone takes something that's not true, and if you repeat it enough, it becomes truth. And that's what happened here. They spent hours and hours thinking roof fire. And they were all pretty much dead anyway, but the time that they lost by not treating it what it was, it's a lot like how the beginning of COVID and things like that. It's like you take something and you have a little teeny lie and put it at the top of the mountain and push it into the snow, and by the end it gets to the bottom, you've got an avalanche. So I really, really like how they started out with showing us how it's at the root it was such a small moment, such a small lie in the beginning, and it's everything. It changed the course of everything, just that one moment in the control room.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is it's people are either convincing themselves of a lie or trying to convince others of a lie to cover their butts. Yeah. There's self-preservation going on, and so the guys that are the minions who are repeatedly saying we didn't do anything wrong, they start to go with, the core didn't blow up, because then we're in even more trouble. So we're going to go with the tank theory thing, even though the evidence we're being presented with says that's not the case. We're going to convince ourselves. And the same thing with the fireman, when he sees his friend's hand melting by touching the thing that is all around him, and he's at a nuclear power plant, logically he's going, there's radiation everywhere. We got to get out of here. But he lies to himself and says, no, I was told that it's the roof and it's just a fire and I'm overreacting.
Yeah.
And he's going to be dead. But I'm just saying, what I mean? That's those guys are making those little lies just because that's how they're trying to get through this. And it is. And it's going to run even deeper, because as you go further up the Soviet chain of command and the titles get longer, those people are wanting not just to cover their butts, but cover what they've got. You know, those guys are living higher on the Soviet hog than anyone else. They have more to lose. So it sure ain't going to be their fault.
Yeah, it's so much of the shifting blame as a, we're going to go with this, but it's not my fault. It's not my fault.
Yeah. Right.
Ugh.
Well, what did the guy with the great hair say? He goes, "How could it be my fault? I was asleep when the test happened."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't matter that he ordered it. He wasn't there. He didn't do anything wrong.
Right. Yeah,
Come on.
Exactly.
He's innocent.
He is.
Yeah.
Totally. And I know you'd mentioned earlier too, I just wanted to point out, like when all those guys went in the bunker and you're like, those guys are probably being exposed. They're far enough away from where the reactor building is. The plant is a massive site with multiple buildings and stuff. And where they are is like the administration building. That's where that bunker is, I think. They're, I'm sure, getting exposure, but it's not necessarily lethal exposure. So they're not, it's like what they're getting is different than what like the firemen got. You know what I'm saying? So so those guys, and the fact they did go into that bunker, which there's a lot of concrete between them and the outside, so they're not quite as bad off right now as other people that are there. And how about that scene when, and I think it's a slow motion scene, when the two soldiers are dragging Dialatov's body to the ambulances, and he's looking around and he sees like that old woman, and she's got blood coming out of her nose and her mouth, and there are other guys dressed up in the chef outfits, and they're all bloody and blistery, and he's looking around, and you almost get the sense there's like a little bit of realization on his face, like it's finally hitting him that this might not be a tank explosion. Yeah. You can see that realization. I'm sure he sort of explained away his own health situation in that moment. And then as they're dragging him out and trying to get him out of there, and then he sees all those things, it's like, oh, well, that doesn't look good. Oh, well, that doesn't look good either. None of this looks good. Worse. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. The last couple things that I had note-wise, there's a scene earlier in the show where you cut to, I don't know if it's Kiev or it's a bigger city, to a hospital, and it's like on the maternity ward, and there's this old man doctor and like a younger woman doctor, and they're kind of going over a couple of gals that are in various stages of labor, and he's like, hey, I won't need you for a couple hours because it's late. And again, this is like, it's like 1:50 in the morning or 2 a.m. in the morning, so it's really, really early or really, really late, depending on how you look at it. And he's like, why don't you go, if you want, you can go get some rest for a couple hours because nothing is critical with the babies. And she's like, we haven't gotten any people from the plant fire. And he's like, what plant fire? And she's like, the nuclear plant. And you can see it out their window, right? You can see it burning in the distance. And he's like, oh, I guess it must not be that bad. And then she asks, do we have any iodine? Yeah. And he's like, iodine? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, you mean disinfectant? And she's like, no, I mean like iodine pills, which, tells you she has a glimmer of how radiation works and what the few things you can do to counter it, which is you ingest iodine and it will neutralize some of the radioactivity in your system. And he's like, no, why would we have iodine? And you're like, oh, God, you're going to need lots and lots of iodine. But so then later on at the end of the episode, it cuts back to her, and she is woken up because she starts hearing people like running outside in the hallway. And she, gets up and she comes outside, and all the nurses and doctors are like on full alert and they're running. And it's just a chilling scene because she looks out the window and you see this like line of ambulances and like army trucks pulling up to the hospital, and it's clearly full of all those people we just saw in this episode. So yeah. Ugh. And then the very last bit of it, you see it's finally dawn. It's the next morning, and of course Jared Harris has been called. He knows there's a meeting at like 2:00 that day, and so the wheels are in motion. But then it cuts back, and the fire is finally out at the plant, and it's just giving off all this black smoke because it's still smoking. And then you see the smoke being blown through the wind, and it's heading towards this, big city type thing. And then you cut to the city, and there's all these children, and they're going to school, and moms are out with their little kids, and it's a bright sunny day, and everything's great. And after all these people kind of walk by, the camera is like down at like ankle level as it's kind of moving through these people. And the very last image is a bird falling out of the sky and hitting the ground and then dying.
It's chilling, really.
It is, and it's almost to the point where if you wouldn't believe it was real if you didn't know it was real.
Yeah. It's just it's one of those shows too where it's like it's the layers of suck. Just they keep piling on and on and on and on and on, and just like the dead bird at the end, like that you're filled with dread this whole time, and then that final moment you're like, oh God, and then it's like the episode's over, you're like, well, this started off great.
Yeah.
That's uplifting,
But weren't you just so tempted to be like, episode 2, go?
I really was.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to sort of like we said, I want to digest this, talk about it, and then once we put this episode to bed, then I'll be ready to sort of jump into the next one. But it's hard. It's really hard to not do it. It's really hard.
Yeah, I know.
People.
I mean, I had to fight the urge when I watched it twice, and I watched it the first time Sunday night, and that was with the idea. Originally we thought we were going to record on Wednesday until date night interfered, but
sorry.
But anyway, so then it made it that much more just like I was like biting my fingernails because I'm like, I really want to watch episode 2, but now I gotta wait till at least Thursday because we're gonna record on Thursday. So
yeah,
it was really hard to not just push forward. So and that's a sign of it that it's a good series.
Yep, it sure is. Oh, I'm dying. I mean, I'm a little behind on Mandalorian too, so I don't know which one I'm gonna watch first. Maybe I'll watch this and then I'll cheer myself up by watching Mandalorian, because that'll be at least have something slightly uplifting. I mean, Grogu alone is enough to really sort of put a smile on your face.
Bring a smile to your face. Yeah, absolutely.
As much as you can.
And I don't know if you looked. But this, I believe, is the longest episode of the series.
Oh.
Which was like an hour and 23 minutes, but the rest of them are all at least an hour long. So.
Okay.
So it's a little bit longer, like than just looking at The Last of Us, the last series that we covered. Those episodes, they kind of ran the gamut from like the season finale was like 42 minutes long, which we all thought was super short. But the longest one I think was the pilot, and it was like a little bit over an hour, and the rest of them kind of clocked in at like 50 minutes, 52 minutes. So this is a little bit more, little bit longer, but not much. And trust me, you won't notice it because they fly by.
Yeah, I don't think I will notice. All right, so I think we've covered everything we wanted to discuss. Anything else before we go ahead and take our break? I think we did good.
I think so. Just radiation bad.
Yeah, radiation bad.
I think that's the lesson.
Yeah, and sadly, not a lot good in Chernobyl. No. So radiation bad, and then that's all we have to say about that. There's really no like
radiation bad, good. And it's radiation bad and kitty fed. That's our good thing we take away.
Those are the only things that were good, really. I know.
It really was.
I know. All right. Well, folks, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk listener feedback. We're going to talk about what's coming up next on the podcast. So, yeah. that's that.
All right, stick around. We'll be right back.
The following is an emergency action message. Civil authorities have identified a biological threat that they deem credible. This threat could potentially affect the entire continental United States.
The dead are returning to life and attacking the living.
911, what's your emergency?
There's a man up bad and he's attacking another man. Looks like he's biting him, like on the arm.
The initial signs are puzzling, unclear.
Getting pulled out of their cars and thrown to the ground. It looks like the bus passengers are biting their victims.
Soon, however, the reality is clear and undeniable.
The crisis involving the recently dead continues. Parliament today passed a law that requires all bodies of the recently deceased to be registered and turned...
Toxic Bag Productions has captured the sounds of the zombie apocalypse and brought them to your gaming table. Background ambiences, zombie attacks, and radio transmissions that set the scene for your modern zombie adventure. Download MP3s from drivethrurpg.com or toxicbag.com.
Hey there, this is Greg Nicotero, and you're listening to Aim for the Head podcast with Diana and Steve. And don't forget to always aim for the head, because body shots, they really just don't work.
Hey everybody, we are back. We're going to jump right into some feedback and some messages that we got about the episode itself. Also, some folks who just sort of reacted to hearing that we were going to be covering it. So a little bit more generalized feedback. So we'll jump right in with, we got some feedback from our pal Barbie Allen via the Facebook. Hey Barbie, how are you doing? And she said, it's really good. I watched it just before The Last of Us premiered to check out Mason's work. Very smart. And the fact that this actually happened makes it all the more sad and horrific. Glad you're covering it. Can't wait to hear. And we're glad we're covering it too, even though it's depressingly sad.
It is. It's depressingly sad. You're absolutely right. It is horrific because, we do know that this is mostly based on true stuff.
It's mostly bad.
Yeah. But at the same time, Barbie, like you said, I mean, it's so good.
Yeah. It's so well done. It's such a great story.
Yes. It is. And again, not so much funny haha moments, but just, I think, really gut punching television where you're going to, we're going to watch all these people and what's going to happen to them. And then when you get into what could have happened to the whole planet, with this thing. I mean, we right now, it's just a very local episode 1. It's the people in Pripyat and Kiev and some of those towns near Chernobyl. And it's affecting them. But as we go through this and we start finding out, what potentially could happen or could have happened, it's even more horrific and sad and scary. So yeah, it's but it's so well done. It's just incredible. So, but thanks for writing in, Barbie.
Yeah, thanks, Barbie. Hopefully, as you listen to us cover, as she said, can't wait to hear, feel free to send in thoughts on individual episodes and what you thought of certain things. So hoping to hear from you again and not just this first time. So, yeah, thanks, Barbie.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving along, we got another piece of feedback via the Facebook, and this is from our listener, Penny Lennox.
Hey,
hello, Penny. How you doing? And she starts out by going, OMG. This is going to sound weird, but I'm a Chernobyl super fan. I've been wanting to rewatch it. I don't know. Bragging about being a Chernobyl super fan, I'm not sure if that's something you might want to keep a little bit more close to the vest there, Penny. But we're glad that you're a fan of the show and you're into it.
Yes.
She goes on to say, I assume you know about the official podcast, but if you don't, I really recommend it. Craig Mazin talks a lot about what was 100% true and what was changed, and usually why they changed it. So interesting. And I know you've just recently listened to it. I listened to it back when I watched the first time. And yes, Penny, you're absolutely right. The Craig Mazin official podcast is really good, and it really helps kind of explain things that you might not have picked up on you know, where he'll be like, well, you know, this happened and what this really means. And he kind of sometimes goes a little technical. Sometimes he just goes into dramatically, you know, why things are happening. And it really does give you a better overall understanding of, you know, the events and what was going on. So you were 1,000% correct on that.
I found it helped too with the name thing, and we talked a little bit about that, but we'll talk some more. That was just such a stumbling block, is, you know, knowing who is who. And, you know, it's one thing when you're in the room and someone says to you, you know, Foeman, and he speaks back, you're like, oh, that's him.
Yeah.
But then later there's going to be moments where they're talking about someone and, you know, Foeman did this, and you're like, who's that again? So it's,
which guy was that?
Yeah. So I feel like I put together at the beginning of our podcast notes, a little character guide for myself. I did the same thing when we covered Kingdom, because that was difficult as well. So I'm hoping that we keep people clear. And I found that the reiteration of like moments, and with Craig Mazin calling them by their character names a lot, really helped drive home who was who and who did what in some of the key scenes. So that's, you know, and he's good at like the pronunciation of them. So you get the person, you get the name, you get the pronunciation, and like it's very helpful. So yeah. Great.
Yeah, and needed. You know, like you said.
Oh God, yeah.
When someone talks about someone and they're not in the room, I'm like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah, exactly. So here's hoping that listening to that podcast and our podcast as well, maybe together as companions, will help cut down on that confusion, so that you aren't doing what we did, which is the guy that was in charge, but not the one with the glasses, the one that had the good hair, because that's that's who Brukiev is. Anyway. Next up, we got some feedback via the Facebook as well, from friend of the podcast, Lisa Dupre. Hello, Lisa. And she writes,
hello, Lisa.
Well, that is... She writes in and says, well, that is the most stressful hour of drama I've ever watched in my life. I know one of the first things we learn in this series is that Anatoly Dyatlov is going to unfairly become the fall guy of one of the worst disasters in human history. But it's also hard to feel bad for him after watching him order man after man to go into the reactor rooms to get water to a core that no longer exists. When he ordered the day shift to come in, that's when I thought, prison's too good for him. So pretty sure this show is not going to get more comfortable from here. And Lisa, I gotta say, I'm with you. I don't think comfort is really in the cards for this, very, very factually accurate portrayal of what happened at Chernobyl.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. And you're right, Lisa. One of the things that Jared Harris says at the beginning when he's either recording into the cassettes or playing it back is that Dyatlov gets sentenced to like 10 years in like a Russian gulag or something, some work prison type thing. And he even says, he's the scapegoat, although it's not his fault. It's all of our fault. So another little nugget they tell you right away, even though you don't even know who that guy is, you find out in the very first opening minute of the show that guy is the guy that the Soviets are saying it was his fault. He did it, and he had to pay the price, right? Yeah. And I agree with you, though. After he kept saying, hey, you two, you go do this. You go down there. You go to the reactor room. You go to the pump room and everything. You're just like, yeah, you could die. I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, exactly. Ugh. The worst. Thanks for writing in, though, Lisa. We appreciate your perspective, and I certainly hope we will hear from you week to week. That's for sure.
Yes, I do too.
Yes.
All right, our last piece of feedback, and this is really cool. It came via the Instagram. Yes, that's right, people. We're on the gram.
We are on the gram.
Kids say. And this came from a gal named Svetlana Voron. And Svetlana, if I mispronounced your name, I apologize. What was awesome was she sent it in Russian. How cool is that? So there's lots of letters I have never seen before. And then Diana was kind enough to translate it for us. And what she basically said, and I think this was responding to our Instagram post with the picture of Chernobyl and all that.
Yeah.
And she said, "Watch the series. I recommend." And so that's really cool. It's like, wow, we've even reached Russia now in terms of our penetration. How cool is that?
Yeah. I hope Svetlana listens. I hope she checks out our podcast,
I do too.
Because
That'd be awesome.
I recommend that as well.
I see what you did there.
I did. Thanks everybody for writing in. Again, if you've got feedback about the whole series, a certain episode, feel free to send it in. We post up every week. You can always send via Facebook or Instagram or Twitter on those posts. You can always email us, aimfortheheadpodcast@gmail.com. We'll have all that information at the end of the podcast too. But coming up on the podcast next week, we will be covering episode 2 from Chernobyl. Title of the episode is "Please Remain Calm." And if that isn't the most ironic title to an episode ever. Oh my God. The description of the episode is: with untold millions at risk, Ulana, who we have not met yet, I don't know who that is, Ulana makes a desperate attempt to reach Valery and warn him about the threat of a second explosion. Great. More explosions. I love it.
Oh yeah. And Valery, of course, again, if you don't have the scorecard, that's Jared Harris.
Yeah, and I believe Ulana is the character that's played by what is her name? Emily, the British actress. I can't remember.
You're correct. It's her. Yes.
Yeah.
She's another scientist in the Soviet Union that her expertise is the nuclear stuff, and so yeah. And again, I think
Emily Watson.
It's Emily Watson, and I think she is one of those, like, that character in the show. She is one of those people I was talking about earlier that, like, in real life, that was like 50 people, and they just kind of smushed it down into one just for ease of storytelling and so on. But yeah, I love whenever I see "Please Remain Calm." My mind immediately goes to Kevin Bacon at the end of Animal House, when everybody's, the parade is running for their lives, and he's like, "Please remain calm, all is well," and it just doesn't end up well for him either. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's what's coming up next on the podcast. We will, of course, be covering this for the next 5 weeks. We will then have in the next 4 weeks, because there's 5 episodes total. Sorry about that. And then we'll have a little bit of time. We'll have 1 week off, and then everyone's favorite post-apocalyptic show. Is that what everyone's favorite? Oh, I'm sorry. Everyone's not favorite post-apocalyptic show, Fear the Walking Dead. That will premiere on May the 14th. But here's the good news, everybody. I just found this out today. Their final season, and this is the final season, so, we will be celebrating at the end. I don't know if it's going to be drinks or whatever, but we're going to do that. It's only 12 episodes. Yeah, fireworks, definitely. There's only 12 episodes, and it's going to be released in 2 6-part segments, is how they call it. The second half is going to come, air quotes, later in 2023. No specified date yet for the second portion. There's also going to be a 7-year time jump. If you didn't know about that, my bad. And then a bunch of other stuff that will be terribly written, and we'll have to sit through it. Fantastic. The thing is that the 6 episodes start on the 14th of May, and it times out so that the mid-season finale, that episode 6, will be the same night as the premiere of Dead City, the Maggie Megan show, and that will run for 6 weeks from there. After that, we're not sure of the, everything else is, later in 2023, etc. As we are calling it, the Daryl Goes to France series. All they've said so far is late 2023, and the Rick and Michonne show is 2024 that we know about. So whether or not they do that second half of Fear the Walking Dead episodes, say they start in like September, and they'll have those timeouts so that they lead right into Daryl Goes to France. That's probably what will happen, but we don't have any confirmation yet of dates, etc. Be aware, though, that when Dead City premieres, it will be in the later time slot. So Fear will be on at 8 Central, 8 Central, 9 Eastern, and Dead City will be the hour later. They'll be at the 9 Central, 10 Eastern slot for just that week, and then for the remaining weeks will be in the coveted 8 Central, 9 Eastern slot, which is usually when Walking Dead and all the other shows are on. So, yeah. So that's sort of what's happening in the world of the Walking Dead universe. And we are fast approaching a crap TV show that didn't know anything about nuclear nuclear anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Nuclear anything. It doesn't matter. It just anyway.
It's just if anything, it just like it makes the headache that you have when you think about that show a little bit worse.
It does.
It's just like you guys were just so just blatantly. I can only assume that they looked into it and saw, oh wow, man, radiation is really lethal, but they didn't want to change their story, so they're just like, screw it, we're just gonna, whatever, we're gonna make radiation be however bad we need it to be. So
yeah, however it suits the purpose of the story is basically how it's treated.
Yeah.
So we are totes looking forward to covering Fear the Walking Dead, as you can tell. Lies. But we're doing it for you guys. We're hate watching for you.
That's right.
So this past weekend, Steve and I went to C2E2, which is the Chicago Entertainment and Comic Expo. We had a blast. It's always a fun time. That is definitely the walking convention for me. I feel like the other conventions are the standing conventions, because we do a lot of standing in line and doing of autographs, and don't get me wrong, we did do a few of those, but I feel like C2E2 is always the walking one, where we go like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, up and down the aisles.
It's C2E2 and it's Fan Expo. Those are the walking ones, because they're at the bigger convention halls.
Yeah,
and the other ones, huge. You're right, it's much more, hey, we're going to stand in this line, and then we're going to walk 10 feet, and we're going to stand in this line, and, it's so different. But really good time. While I can say we didn't technically see Chris Evans, what we did see, though, was lots of girls walking around with this kind of glazed over, far off look in their eye, staggering around with almost like a drunk smile on their face, which we kind of dubbed, they just met Chris Evans.
The one moment where we were in line over by the photo ops area, and there were folks there that were, buying sleeves, getting their additional copies. They all had this sort of glazed deer in headlights look on their face, because they just finished, and they're like, oh my God, this just happened.
I did. Yeah. I was right next to Chris Evans, looked at me, he put his arm on my shoulder or whatever. I mean, it was adorable. But yeah, we did. We met some fun people, and we bought lots of swag, and C2E2 I find tends to be my biggest shopping show in terms of spending money on stuff rather than on autographs.
Yeah. So, I think it's just because they cover such a large swath of entertainment.
Oh yeah.
That there's so much there. There's something for the the comic book folks, for the Japanimation and anime, the video game, the wrestling, TV, movies, from every genre all over the place. I mean, it truly is a pop culture one, and there's a, you name it and you can buy it there. So
yeah, it is. It's incredible, and the people watching is amazing because
the cosplay
so much of it. Yeah, cosplay has become such a huge thing, that there are now, I would say, maybe like 40% of the people who go, maybe even higher than that, but 40% they go, they're in costume, and that's why they go, is to wear the cool cosplays that they've made and let people take pictures of them and stuff, and they just walk around, and it's unbelievable how creative these people are in making these, exact dead on reproductions of like animation characters and stuff, you know what I mean? And they're able to make the costumes and the weapons and the headgear and the armor and all that, and it's just incredible. It really is. And so, we're just walking around wearing like our t-shirts that have pop culture stuff on it, and there's just 1,000 other people that are in full regalia, and it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. It's a fun time, and after COVID and being sort of postponed, and then at dates that weren't normal for them for 2 conventions in a row, they're finally back to the usual sort of time frame that they're in, that they've always been in. So that's great. And it's just obviously there's still, the worry about COVID out there, and there were folks that were being cautious and wearing masks, and, so it's, things are, I'd say they're different, but there's a lot of stuff that's back to where it was. So it was comforting in that sense. But still, it was packed. It was so packed.
Oh, yeah.
There was so many people. And a lot of that, I attribute that to the weekend that they picked was at the tail end of when a lot of folks were on spring break with their kids. And usually Friday is pretty dead. Not lots of people walking around. It was packed on Friday. Oh, it's just amazing. And just so many people. And I put something on Facebook about it, and it's sort of hard to put it in words, but it's, when you see people that have a certain, a love for a certain thing, and there's just so much positivity, whether it's a stranger saying, I love your outfit, can I take a picture? Or it's people meeting up with friends, or people seeing someone they haven't seen in a while, and there's lots of hugs and high fives, and the vibe is always so incredibly positive. Everybody that's there looks like they're having the best time, and it doesn't matter what it is that they love or care about. 90% of the stuff that's there, I have no idea what it is. I don't play a lot of video games, don't watch a lot of anime, I don't watch wrestling anymore. It's, so there's lots of genres, there's lots of things that people get a lot of love out of, and wear it on their sleeve, whether they're in full cosplay or just wearing something close to it, or wearing parts of a costume. And it's just beautiful to see. I may not know what your cosplay is, but I love that you're wearing it. I love that you are comfortable enough this is the place for you to shine, to have these connective moments with other people, So it's just every time I would like sit down to like have a snack and just like people watch, that's just the overwhelming feeling for me is just, I love the vibe. It's always just such a great vibe of people having the best time, and I love it. So
I agree.
Yeah, so more conventions to come for this summer. We'll be busy, June, and then there's a couple in August, and then later in the year. But as we make plans to go to those, we'll obviously tell you dates and where we'll be, and if you're in the area and are going to be attending, please try and find us. We'd love to meet up with people. Love to say hi, take some pictures, put some names to faces and all of that stuff. So we'd love it.
Yeah. Well, and along those lines, actually, coming up in about a month from now, it's May 5th through 7th, is the Indiana Comic-Con. And the reason to consider going there, it's in Indianapolis, so it's not quite as close as going to the McCormick Place there in Chicago. But some of the guests that are going to be there are Kari Payton, of course, Ezekiel, and Cooper Andrew, Jerry. So, a chance to meet those two guys, and I know we've both met Kari before or seen him, and he's awesome.
He's delightful.
He's so good with the fans. I can only imagine that Cooper is as well, but that would be the first, and so that's May 5th through 7th. You can find it if you just go on your internet and type in Indiana Comic Con. You can get all the details. There are a bunch of other guests there as well, not just them, but those are two folks, for Walking Dead fans. If you have never met them and you're close, you should definitely go because, like I said, Kari Payton is awesome, and I assume that Cooper Andrews is too. So
yeah, I can't wait. I say I can't wait, but I can't wait for you because I don't think I'm gonna drive to Indianapolis. Sorry, 4 hours.
Sorry, not sorry. I did it from my house. It says 3 hours and 28 minutes from my house. So
yeah, you live an hour away from me.
I know.
But yeah, it sounds like a good time. I think we've got some folks in Indiana. So let Steve know and meet up and, take pictures with Cooper while you're there. I mean, it sounds like a fun time. There you go. Yeah. Absolutely. Anything else we need to chat about before we wrap it up?
I think that pretty much covers it. Just, just remember it's just a roof fire. That's all you got. If you stick to that, you'll be okay.
Exactly. That's the story we're going with. We're sticking with that. I think it'll work.
That's right.
Maybe. All right. Well, we'll find out if that story works or not when we talk about this again next week. Thanks so much for listening in, folks. We can't wait to talk to you about episode 2. But until then, as always, I'm Diana.
And I'm Steve.
Don't forget to always aim for the head.
Because body shots just don't work. To send us an email, write us at aimfortheheadpodcast@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is @AFTH Podcast. Pictures and video are always welcome at our Instagram account, Aim for the Head Podcast, all one word. But the best way to keep in touch with us is to just like our Facebook page to get all of our updates in your feed.
Coming from inside the house.
Coming from inside the podcast.